I actually already did a video explaining the first half of this worksheet, which is on graphing inequalities using y equals mx plus b. We're going to continue this second video, and I'll do a couple of questions or several questions in this class right here, starting with number 9. And again, if we remember correctly from the notes from yesterday, it says 5.6, graphing linear inequalities. 3 steps. Step 1, make sure it's written in slope-intercept form. That's y equals mx plus b. Step 2, graph it, but determine if it's going to be a solid line or a dotted line. Pretty much, if it has a solid line underneath the inequality, it's going to be a solid line. If it doesn't have a solid line, it's going to be a dotted line. It's not going to be solid. Okay. If it has a solid line underneath it, then it's solid. And then step 3 is decide what side of the line you're going to shade. Okay. And there's a shortcut for that. You could even just look at the less than symbol or the greater than symbol to determine if you shade below or above. Of course, step 1 is to rewrite it in function form, in slope-intercept form, getting y by itself. So you do not want this multiplication of -2 in front of the y. So you're going to do the opposite of multiplying by -2. That's going to be dividing by -2. Divide by -2. Divide by -2. And now we do have it in y equals mx plus b form, slope-intercept form, but we did divide by a negative, and when you divide by a negative on any inequality, what do we do with the symbol? Flip it, change it, right? If you divide or multiply by a negative on your last step, that inequality must change, and it did change from a less than to a greater than. Technically, I should have said less than or equal to a greater than or equal to. And the slope is the fraction in front of x, and -8 divided by -2 is a +4. It's still in front of x, and you want it to look like a fraction, especially when we're graphing. Put it over 1. And the b value is 4 divided by 2, which is -2, and that's your b value. So now we have our inequality in slope-intercept form, where your slope is the rise 4, run 1, and your b value, your y-intercept, is -2. So we begin with the -2 value, and we put that dot on the y-axis, because after all, that is the y-intercept. So go to the y-axis, go to -2 and put a dot right there. And then from that dot, you're going to rise and run according to your slope. It goes up 4 because it's a positive fraction. It's going up. If it were negative, it'd be going down 4. But it's positive, so you're going up 4, and then you're going to run 1. And you always run to the right. Once again, just to reiterate, if your fraction's positive, you're going up. If it's negative, you're going down. But you're always going to run to the right, okay? So 4 up, 1 to the right. So from this dot, you're going to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 to the right, put a dot right there. And then from that dot, you could continue to go up 1, 2, 3, 4. You're going to be 1 unit off, and you could put a dot up there if you want. You don't really have to. And before you actually draw your line, the 2 additional steps, when you compare it to an equation, the 2 additional steps are, is this going to be a solid line or is it going to be dotted? What do you guys say, solid or dotted? Solid. Why? Because it has a solid line underneath the inequality. So this will be a solid line going through these 2 dots. Put an arrow on it, and I'm going to put it pointing towards that dot that's off the graph. So this is a solid line, and the other additional step you need to do when comparing to graphing an equation, after deciding if it's solid or dotted, is to decide where your answers are at. They're either going to be on one side of the line or the other side of the line. Now, some people may get a little confused right here because it's a pretty steep line, and you might start looking at this incorrectly in terms of left and right, when we should be looking at it in terms of the y-axis, right? Y is greater than. So here's the y-axis, and if I put my pencil on any dot of this blue line, I want to put it on this one right here, on the y-axis itself, that's the y value of -2. And if I want to represent the y values that are greater than or equal to that -2 value, which way is greater than? Is it above or below? Greater than is above. So we know that we're going to be shading in above. So from this point, shading in above. So we're going to be shading in everything that's on this left side of that blue solid line. Okay? So once again, step 1, rewrite it in slope-intercept form. Get the y by itself. Y equals mx plus b. Step 2, graph it, but determine if it's a solid line or a dotted line, depending on if it has a solid line underneath it. If it has a solid line underneath it, it's going to be solid. If not, it's not. Okay? Step 3, decide what side to shade, either above or below. And that's where your solutions are going to be at. Okay. You know what? I might as well throw this little curveball at you right now. If I told you, is the coordinate 3, 2 a solution to that original inequality? Yes or no? Is 3, 2 a solution to that original inequality? I mean, you could plug in the 3 right there and the 2 right there and work it all out, see if it gives you a true statement or false, but that'd be a waste of time because you could just look at the graph. The graph, after all, when we graph things, we are representing the infinite amount of answers. So I'm asking you, is this coordinate 3, 2 part of these answers? No, because if you go 3, 2, it's not part of the answer, right? So this would be no, it's not a solution. Okay. What if I asked you, how about positive 3, 10? What do you think of that? Would that be a solution? If you're at positive 3 and you go way up here to 10, would it be on the highlighted area? Maybe, right? So if you really wanted to determine that, you would have to plug in 3 for x. That'd be negative 8 times 3 is negative 24. Negative 24 plus 4 is negative 20. And plug in negative 10 for y. Negative 2 times 10 is negative 20. So negative 20 is equal to negative 20. So 310 actually is a solution. That's a yes right there. I know you can't really see it visually, but I mean, we got an idea. And when we did go 310, we saw that it's pretty close. We don't really know if it's on the highlighted side or not the highlighted side. So that's why we actually plugged it in to verify if it actually worked or not. If I asked you, is the coordinate negative 3, negative 4 a solution? Heck yeah. Negative 3, negative 4. That's in the highlighted area, right? I don't even have to plug it in, but I could if I wanted to. Plug in a negative 3 right there, a negative 4 right there. It will be a true statement. Anyways, enough wasting time. Let's move on. Number 10, I want to graph this. Y is not, it's almost by itself. I need to do one thing. What do? Yeah, you want to either multiply everything by negative 1 or divide everything by negative 1. The bottom line is you want positive y, mx plus b. You don't want a negative y, mx plus b. You want a positive y. So you're going to either multiply everything by negative 1 or divide everything by negative 1. I'm going to divide by negative 1, divide by negative 1, divide by negative 1. Because I'm dividing by a negative, what do I need to do with that inequality? Switch it. So instead of a greater than, it's going to be a less than. And then after that, it's pretty simple. Change that to a negative 7 in front of the x. Change that to a positive 5 on the b. Okay? And of course, if you wanted to graph this, you're going to put that negative 7 over 1. So it could be in the form of rise over run. And you always begin with your b value at 5. Let's put a dot at 5, which is way up here on the edge, on the y-axis. Then from that dot, you're going to drop 7 and run 1. So drop 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and run 1. You always run to the right, and we're going to put a dot right there. Wait, I did that wrong. Let me see, right there. Double check. 5, 6, 7. Yeah. All right, so there are our 2 dots. Will this line that goes right through these 2 dots, will it be solid or dotted? It's going to be dotted. So put a bunch of dots going through those. Put arrows on it. Okay, now we need to shade either above or below. This could be tricky because it's so steep that you might want to start thinking in terms of left and right, which would be incorrect. Okay, you got to be thinking of up and down, especially because you're talking about y's. So y is what? Y is less than. So the way to be absolutely certain is to put your pencil on one of these dots. I'm gonna put it on this dot. What's that y value right there? What altitude are you at on the y number line? You're at 5, right? Okay. So if you want your y's that are less than, are you going to be going above 5 or below 5? Below. So you're going to be shading everything down here, which is obviously on the left-hand side. Okay. So shading below, which implies it's going to be on everything on this side. Ta-da. Okay. Oh, what? Started erasing. My bad. Fill that back in. Okay, let's go to the next one. Right here we have a two-step inequality. Let's begin with what? What do I do to get y by itself? I'm going to get rid of that minus 5 by going plus 5, plus 5. I want to rewrite it. It says 2y is less than 3x minus 2. For my final step, I am going to divide everything by 2 because this really says 2 times y. And you don't want that multiplication of 2 in front of the y. You want y by itself. So you're going to divide by 2, divide by 2, divide by 2. You're going to have y by itself. Do I keep the symbol or do I flip it? Keep it, because I did not multiply or divide by a negative on the last step. And 3 divided by 2, you can't really do it, so you're just going to rewrite it, 3 over 2. X on the side of that rise over run fraction. And the b value is negative 2 divided by 2, which is a negative 1, right? Negative 2 divided by 2, negative 1. There's your slope-intercept form inequality. Now you graph it by starting with your b value at negative 1. That's the y-intercept. So you go to your y-axis, you go to negative 1, you put a dot there. And from that dot, you need to rise and run according to your slope. So you're going to rise 1, 2, 3, and run 1, 2, and you're going to put a dot right there. And then you're going to continue to rise 1, 2, 3, run 2, and put a dot right there. And you could do this pattern backwards. Over 2 this way, down 3, over 2 this way, down 3, over 2 this way, down 1, 2, 3, and put a dot right there. And then you have to draw your line. The 2 additional steps are, do I draw it solid or dotted, and then shade, right? So is this going to be a solid line or a dotted line? Dotted. And before I finish, why is it dotted? Because there's no solid line. In order for it to be a solid line, there has to be a solid line underneath your inequality, okay? So dotted is the line that we're doing here. Arrows, arrows, and then we need to shade. It's either going to be above that blue dotted line or below that blue dotted line. What do you say? Above or below? Below, because it's a less than, right? Y is less than. So if you go to any y value, like on the line, like this dot right here is a negative 1. If you went this way, that'd be going 1, 2, 3. Those would be greater values. That would have to be a greater than if you're shading above. So if you're at negative 1, what y values are less than negative 1? Well, negative 2 is less than negative 1. Negative 3 is less than negative 1. Negative 4 is less than negative 1. Obviously below. So you're going to shade in everything that is below that blue dotted line. Okay, let's move on. Number 12. That's in standard form. I'm not going to bother with standard form. I'm not going to do x and y intercepts. I'm just going to get y by itself, right? That's the easiest thing to do, I would say. Subtract 2x. Subtract 2x, you're going to have a negative 3y is greater than or equal to, you're going to rewrite it, negative 2x plus 9. And then you have to get rid of the multiplication of negative 3 in front of the y. So you're going to do the opposite of multiplying by negative 3, which is dividing by negative 3. When you do to one side, you do to the other side. I'm talking about all terms. So I am dividing by a negative on my last step. So I must flip that inequality symbol, less than or equal to. Once again, because I divided by a negative on my last step, you have to change the inequality symbol. So the greater than or equal to became a less than or equal to. And then right here on the slope, we have a negative 2 divided by a negative 3. You can't really divide 2 by 3. We're going to leave it like a fraction. However, a negative divided by a negative is a positive. So we're going to make it look nicer by making it a positive 2/3 with the x on the side. And last but not least, we have a 9 divided by negative 3. That's a negative 3. So there's our inequality that's in slope-intercept form. And now it's ready to graph. You always begin by looking at your b value, your y-intercept. It's going to cross the y-axis at negative 3. We should all put a dot at negative 3. Then from that dot, we're going to rise and run according to our slope. We're going to go, whoops, I accidentally erased the dot at negative 3. We're going to rise 2 and run 1, 2, 3. Rise 2, run 3. Rise 1, 2, run 1, 2, 3. You're at that location, the point 3, negative 1. And you could continue to rise 2 and run 1, 2, 3. You'll be 1 unit off. If you want, you could draw that 1 unit off dot. You could go backwards, over 3, down 2, over 1, 2, 3, down 2, and put a dot right there if you wanted to, which I will. And then we're going to determine if this is a solid line or a dotted line because it has a solid line underneath the inequality, it will be a solid line going through these dots. Put an arrow, put an arrow. I did put it facing or pointing towards that dot that's off the graph. And then we either shade above or below. And since we have y by itself, it's really simple. Y is less than. That would imply below on the y values, which would be below on this line, below the lower part of this graph. So we highlight everything that's below the blue solid line. Number 13. So that's in standard form, ax plus by equals c, but I am not going to bother with finding the x and the y intercepts. I'm just going to get y by itself. I am going to get rid of the 5x by subtracting 5x, subtracting 5x. I'm going to rewrite it. It's going to be a negative 4y is greater than, write the x term first, negative 5x, and then the positive 22nd. It's almost in y equals mx plus b form. I just need to get rid of this multiplication of negative 4. How do you get rid of the multiplication of negative 4? You divide by negative 4. What you do to one side, do to the other side. Divide by negative 4 here, divide by negative 4 over there. You're going to end up with y all by itself, but because you divided by a negative on your last step, you have to flip that inequality symbol, and that'll become a less than. And right here, 5 divided by 4 you can't do, but a negative divided by a negative is a positive, so you could at least write it as a positive 5 over a positive 4 with the x on the side. And the b value is 20 divided by negative 4, which is a negative 5. So what we have here is our slope-intercept form inequality. And now it's ready to graph. It crosses the y-axis at negative 5. So go to the y, go to negative 5 and put a dot right there. It's right on the bottom edge of this graph because it's only a 5 by 5 graph. And from that dot, you're going to rise 5 and run 4. Rise 5, you're back to the origin. Run 4, you're right here at the x value of 4. Put a dot right there. And then, is this going to be a solid line or a dotted line? Well, if it had a solid line, it would be a solid line, but it doesn't, so it's not. It cannot be a solid line, so I draw some dots right through it. And then I need to shade either above or below. Y is less than. Up here would be above, down here is below, less than is below, so we're going to shade below. So every single value below that blue dotted line is a solution to the original inequality up here. Okay. Don't believe me? You could pick a point, like let's say 4, negative 1. That will work. If you plug in a 4 for x and negative 1 for y, 4 for x, 5 times 4 is 20. Negative 1 right there, negative 4 times negative 1 is positive 4. 20 plus 4 is 24. 24 is greater than 20. That will work any point in the highlighted area, which is infinite, right? It continues on further than this little tiny triangle. It's infinite. None of these work up here. All of these work down here. Number 14, it's in point slope form. But again, I am going to rewrite it in slope-intercept form. Okay. So to rewrite this in slope-intercept form, I'm going to distribute the fraction to get rid of the parentheses. So negative 2/3 times x, that's negative 2/3 x. Negative 2/3 times 3, you could put the 3 over 1, and you could actually show your work. Negative 2/3 times 3 over 1. But the reality is you're multiplying a fraction by its denominator, so that will eliminate the fraction. So that cancels out, and you end up with a nice, beautiful minus 2 right here. And we have the negative 2/3 that's right in front of that minus 2. We have the less than symbol. We have the y minus 1. We almost have it in slope-intercept form. All I need to do is get rid of that minus 1 by doing the opposite of minus 1, which is plus 1 and plus 1. So that was our last step. We have y. Since we didn't multiply or divide by a negative, the inequality stays the same. It's still less than. Our slope is negative 2 over 3 with the x right next to that fraction. And the b value is a negative 1 because negative 2 plus 1 is negative 1. So here's our y mx plus b inequality. We now know that it crosses the y-axis at negative 1. Put a dot right there. From that dot, you're going to rise negative 2, which means you're going down 2, and you're going to run always to the right 3. So down 2 over 1, 2, 3. Put a dot right there. And if you continue to go down 2 over 3, you'd be off the graph. You could go backwards, over 3, up 2, over 1, 2, 3, up 2. You'd be right there at this location. And now let's draw our line. It's not a solid line because it doesn't have a solid line underneath it. So we're going to draw a dotted line going through these dots. Put some arrows on it. And then you either shade above or below this blue dotted line. Because it says y is less than, you're going to be shading below. Number 15. It's in point slope form, but I want to change it to slope intercept. We're going to distribute 2 times x, 2x, 2 times -1, -2. Bring down that inequality, the greater than or equal to, bring down the y plus 3. I almost have y by itself. All I need to do is get rid of that plus 3. You get rid of a plus 3 by doing the opposite of plus 3, which is a -3. And what you do to one side, you do to the other side. Okay. So what do we have left? We have y greater than or equal to. I did not change it because I didn't multiply or divide by a negative. I subtracted 3. So what do I have left? Y is greater than or equal to. My slope is 2 with an x right next to it. And you might as well make it look like a fraction. Put it over 1. And the b value over here, -2, take away 3, that's a -5. So there's our slope-intercept inequality. Slope-intercept form inequality. That crosses at -5. So we put a dot on the y-axis. Remember, the b value is a y-intercept. On the y-axis, you go to -5. You put a dot right there. And from that dot, you're going to rise 1, 2, and run 1. And you're going to put a dot right there. You're going to continue to rise 1, 2, and run 1, and put a dot right there. And so on, rising 2, running 1. And then because this does have a solid line underneath it, it will be a solid line going through all these red dots with arrows on it. And then you shade either above or below. Because this says y is greater than or equal to, it's above, right? You put your pencil on the line. Where is greater than on the y's? Y is running up and down. Greater than is above. So you're going to shade in everything that is above that blue solid line. You guys get it? All right. Last question. We're going to get y by itself and then mx plus b. But notice that there's parentheses right here, and y equals mx plus b doesn't have parentheses, so we need to get rid of the parentheses. How? By distributing. We're going to distribute the -3 halves. -3 halves times x, -3 halves x. -3 halves times 4. Let's show our work somewhere. -3 over 2 times, I'm going to put that 4 over a 1. And then you could either cancel first, reduce first, then multiply, or multiply first, then reduce. I'm going to multiply first. A 3 times 4 is 12. And on the bottom, a 2 times 1 is 2. And of course, a negative times a positive is a negative. So we really have a fraction -12 over 2, which is really a -12 divided by 2, which is really a -6. Okay. So this -3 halves x, I'm going to place it right in front of that -6. And I'm going to bring down the rest, the less than or equal to the y minus 4. Y is almost by itself. All I have to do is get rid of that -4 by doing the opposite of -4, which would be adding 4. What I do to one side, I do to the other side, specifically to the number. I wouldn't be able to add 4 to x's, so I do it to the number. So I'm going to rewrite my final slope-intercept form inequality. Y, I don't flip it because I didn't multiply or divide by a negative. Y is less than or equal to -3 over 2. That is your slope in front of x. And then the b value is -2 because -6 plus 4 is -2. And now that we have our slope-intercept form inequality, we're able to graph it. You begin with the b value, the y-intercept of -2. Here's your y-axis. Go to -2. Put a dot right there. From that dot, you're going to drop 3 because it's negative. Drop 3 and then run always to the right, too. Doesn't matter if it's a positive or negative fraction. You're always going to run to the right. So you're dropping 1, 2, 3, running 1, 2. You're going to put a dot right there. And you could use the pattern backwards. Instead of dropping 3 over 2, go over 2 backwards, up 3. Over 2 backwards, up 1, 2, 3. Put a dot right there. Over 2 backwards, 1, 2, 3. Put a dot right there. And then determine if it's a solid line or a dotted line. This line will be solid because it has a solid line underneath the inequality. put some arrows on it. Then you got to shade either above or below. That does say y is less than. Less than means below in terms of up and down, in terms of the y. So you're going to be shading everything that is below that blue solid line. I hope this makes sense, guys, and I hope this helps. This is a skill that we need to know for the test this Friday and also for the final exam next week.